Hi there folks, and welcome to our webinar today on essential interpersonal skills for trainers. My name's Marc Ratcliffe. To check out our agenda, we'll start off by looking at what interpersonal skills are. We'll look at the importance of interpersonal skills for trainers specifically, check out 7 critical interpersonal skills to be effective in the role, and we'll conclude by looking at some of the development options and action plans. In fact, I'll invite you at the end to think about what you're going to do next. So to kick us off, what are interpersonal skills? Please take a few moments to put your best answers in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. So Jeff has said here, soft skills. Yes, they're kind of often regarded as soft skills, things that we have to develop ourselves as opposed to something that we can go and read in a book per se. Anita says skills that help us to connect or communicate with others. That's some good thinking. Samar says here, skills in human relationship building. That's a nice way of saying it. Ray adds skills for interacting with different people. So yeah, all really great responses there, and thanks for your contributions. From my perspective, when we think about interpersonal skills, they are sets of abilities enabling a person to interact positively and work effectively with others. So I think from your perspective, we nailed that definition. So why are interpersonal skills important for trainers? I have a few ideas on the topic. Interpersonal skills are essential for trainers in developing those relationships and helping to communicate key messages to students and other colleagues, and I guess anyone else you come into contact with through your training and assessment roles. Having an awareness of your own interpersonal skills, as well as those used by the people around you, will ultimately assist in the development of more productive partnerships in your learning environments. And finally, it will also assist in being able to effectively manage the tasks that trainers are responsible for. So let's look at the 7 essential interpersonal skills that'll put you on that righteous path to success when it comes to being a trainer and assessor. At the top of our list is communication skills. It's often called the lifeblood of any business. So what might this involve? Once again, folks, feel free to put your best ideas in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Now, Crystal says here, clear instructions. Now, I've got to agree. Sometimes those instructions can become destructions. Joanne says here, ensuring that messages are understood. Jeff adds paraphrasing. Absolutely, Jeff, I've got to agree. It's a way for us to be able to check the understanding from both parties by paraphrasing. So good thinking there. Joanne adds again, it's about checking for meetings. So we're on the same page there, Joanne. Thanks for that comment. Mohammed talks about body language. So it's not just the verbal words, is it? It's also about the gestures that we might be using and ensuring that they're consistent with those verbal messages. Jeff adds again, from a verbal perspective, we're looking at things like tone and pace and pitch and pause. And I'd also say emphasis can make a major difference in getting that right information across. In terms of some things I prepared earlier, communication skills will include things like written communication, verbal communication, listening, the giving of instructions, as well as the providing of feedback. So I think from our contributions from the chat box, we really embodied those key thoughts. The next thing is having that positive attitude, and I can't say this enough. Positivity can be absolute gold. It can be the infectious thing that you need to motivate people, spur them on, get things done. And the reverse is also true. If you're negative, that sort of negativity can become poison to an organization if left unchecked. Put simply, guys, the more you put in, the more you get out. So how can a trainer demonstrate a positive attitude? As always, put your best answers in the chat box below. So Mohammed kicks us off with the idea of understanding some of those social norms or values. Crystal adds, reading the room. Now, I like what you're saying there, Crystal, because when we read the room, what we end up doing is we are understanding how to make people feel more comfortable, using the right language to support who they are and what they need and what they're used to, you know. It also helps them to, as I said, feel more comfortable because you're speaking their language, as it were. Anita says here, you start to get buy-in because you're positive, and you know, by being enthusiastic yourself, this will help others to also be engaged with what's going on. And Jeff concludes, putting other people's feelings and issues first will again help you to create that positive environment, particularly for learning. You know, if it's all about you as the trainer, you're the guru, the sage on the stage, as it were, and you're not thinking about the needs of the students, they're going to be pretty disengaged fairly quickly. Next on our list is social awareness. Now, social awareness is about being in tune to others' emotions. And it's an essential interpersonal skill, and it dictates how many of your other interpersonal skills you should be using. When we're concentrated on our own projects, sometimes doing our own things, we sometimes forget that we've got other people who need our attention. And other people's issues and problems, if they go left unchecked, then they start to become negative again. And ultimately, we're not creating those productive relationships we were talking about earlier. This means we have to include that self-management, understanding how our mood, how our reactions impacts on other people, and looking at ways for us to develop those more effective relationships, if you like. So what might this involve? Jeff starts us off with the term emotional intelligence. Now, this is something that's really come to the fore in the last decade. And there's so many statistics out there that talk about what effective leaders are doing. They're understanding their emotional intelligence as opposed to their product knowledge, understanding how they impact on the people around them and how they can become in tune when people aren't quite in the right headspace, and how we can support people to get back on track and feel comfortable and confident in what they need to do. So a really good start there from Jeff. Crystal adds there an awareness of your own mood and impact. So yes, we've certainly said this already. So it's sort of a good reiteration of that. Ray says checking our behaviour. Is it as productive as it could be? Or are we getting stuck up on things that perhaps are counterproductive to our aim? And Joe says here, it's creating a win-win situation. So again, is what we're doing going to produce something that everybody benefits from? Self-management allows us to control our emotions when they're not aligned to what we would be considering as appropriate behavior in a given situation. This means controlling things like anger, hiding frustration, exuding calmness. Now, in terms of that calmness situation, I attended a growth summit a few years ago, and one of the presenters there gave some really great advice about what a leader should be doing. And often as a leader, as a supervisor, manager, if you like, or even a manager of a classroom, the trainer in this case, they often find themselves running around with like a chicken with their head cut off type thing, where they're the ones that are racing around and on fire, and that sends a tone across the rest of the organization or the rest of the people that they are working with. Whereas if they show calmness and everybody else is busy and they know what they have to do, they've got good instructions, they've got good systems, they've got good resources to allow them to do their job, then that calmness gets confidence, but it also helps you to schedule things and have that oversight for making sure that everything is happening in the way that it's supposed to. So it's kind of reversing that. You shouldn't be on fire. For want of a better expression, your people should be on fire. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they should be busy as opposed to us putting out fires all the time. The next one is this sense of responsibility and accountability. So saying that you're going to do something and then actually doing it is a sign of responsibility. This helps to build trust between yourself and those who rely upon you, and also encourages others to seek your support and assistance in the future. Holding yourself accountable for your actions ultimately is one of the most difficult things you can do, both personally and professionally. However, it is a crucial element of managing things like conflict. We have to own our mistakes, but work swiftly to make up for them. So rather than pointing your finger at somebody else or saying it's not my fault, take responsibility and say, you know what, I didn't intend this to happen. However, I'm going to bring about the solution. And this happens all the time. A student might have a different expectation about, what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and then gets frustrated when you give them some feedback which is inconsistent with where they thought they were going to be. Rather than saying, well, that's their fault, or that's the person who wrote the assessment's fault, or that is your manager's fault because they're making you to do it, take it on board and find that swift solution so that we can get back on track. Now, I want to launch a quick poll here, folks, and here's your question. How well do you think you currently manage your responsibility and accountability? If you think you're at the top of the poll there, you're awesome. Choose the 1. At the bottom of the scale here, if you think that maybe it's not your fault or it's somebody else's problem, you'd be picking a 4, and then you've got a couple of other options in the middle. So just choose the one you think most embodies you, and we'll get a sense for the percentages of what you're thinking in a moment. I can see there that there are plenty of responses coming in. There's responses for each of those, which is great. I'm going to close that in just a moment. Looks like almost everybody has voted now. So just looking at the results, 40% of you are saying the number 2, you can handle it most of the time, which is good news. 40% are saying that maybe you could do with some development in this area. So that's the value of a webinar like this. If you've written the 2, this gives you some affirmation and some direction, as well as if it's a 3, for instance, you might be saying, I've got some ideas to get myself back on track, if you like. And 10% of you have taken the 2 extremes. 10% of you have said that you're awesome, you should be writing the book. So again, hopefully this webinar provides some affirmation, and then a further 10% are suggesting that maybe it's not your fault, it's always somebody else's fault, and there's obviously some work to do there. No judgment, folks. It's always good to know what sort of frame of mind that you're in, but it's also useful to get a sense for how we can be most productive moving forward. The next item on our list, team, is time management, and this has to be the single greatest challenge that a trainer and assessor finds. Both new trainers as well as experienced trainers will often have challenges when it comes to managing time and scheduling and getting everything done in the time that's available. So as a trainer, what are some of those key time management challenges that you're experiencing now? As always, please feel free to pop your best ideas in the chat box. Anita starts us off here, being realistic in how long things will take. Absolutely. I think that we're in a bubble sometimes and we think, yeah, that'll only take a couple of hours. But when we're competing against so many other priorities, sometimes it's going to take us a lot longer to give it the focused attention that it requires. So good one from Anita. Samar says, actually finding the time to complete those tasks. Ray adds here, we're just wasting time. And Muhammad agrees, saying that the unproductive use of time. Joanne adds here, those endless meetings, seemingly without purpose or direction. One of the things that I was told a few years ago that really helps to move meetings along is to have a shorter agenda. So more meetings with less agenda items rather than less meetings with a page full of agenda items. So they're quick, they're short, they're sharp, people can see the end, and you can fully focus on what the key area is rather than having 10 things on the list. Also too, when you're doing short meetings, you can do them standing up. If you sit down, they tend to take longer, because after standing for 10 minutes or so, it becomes a little bit uncomfortable. So you're less likely to dilly-dally and more likely to cut to the chase. So there's definitely some benefits there. Next on our list is critical thinking and problem solving. Now, it's going to be a rare day that you go through without any problems whatsoever. What makes this a skill is not necessarily how quickly you solve the problem, but how you go about doing it. So don't put your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. Going, I don't want to know. because ultimately that only makes things worse. The problem doesn't disappear, and you've only got to come back and deal with it at a later point, and it's probably become even worse of an issue by then. Then you've got people that throw their hands up and in denial saying, "Oh, not my problem. Not my problem. I don't know anything about it." Again, this is not going to be helpful. So there are some key aspects of successful problem solving. First of all, we need to identify exactly what the problem is. Rather than simply treating the symptoms, we want to look at the cause. We can then dissect the problem so that it's fully understood. We can examine all the options and solutions rather than coming to the first one off the top of your head. What's going to be the best choice? And then setting up a system of strategies and objectives to solve the problem or problems. Then you can put this plan into effect because everybody knows what it is and there's full transparency about what's required by the parties. And then finally, you need some system of monitoring the progress. And I'd kind of add that accountability at this step as well, making sure that we've got people who are going to be responsible for taking the action and then someone who's accountable for ensuring that the solution has actually been achieved. Okay, folks, we're about halfway through our webinar and I'm going to give you your 30 seconds of Zen. Have a quick stretch break, grab a drink of water, stretch it out, and we'll be back in just a sec. So hopefully you've done your power Pilates there, team, and you're all stretched out and rehydrated. Let's move on. I'd like to pose this question first. What are some of the common problems that need solving as a trainer? Talk to me about what's happening for you in your own situations now. Jeff leads us off with dealing with complaints. So I would agree, Jeff, that again, expectations aren't always met between colleagues and other colleagues or students and trainers, and just trying to get to a reasonable resolution there is going to be important. Samar says here again, expectations not meeting reality. Okay, and that goes both sides of the counter too. We need to make sure that our expectations are the same as what our students or our colleagues are bringing to the table. Ray says here, time issues again. Absolutely. We talked about time management being so critical earlier. So, having the time to do all the things that we need to do or doing more with less as it were as time goes on. Joe adds here, creating reasonable adjustments might be a problem. Having the time to invest in identifying how we can reshape this so it still meets the requirements of the relevant training package, but meets the specific needs of the candidate. So it's a good one there, Joe. Mohammed says being able to access the information that we need when we need it. So sometimes, and I assume this is what you're saying, Mohammed, sometimes in a training role, we might not be privy to all the back office information, things like how long it takes for a certificate to be issued or, how do people find out about their account or something like that. So having that information accessible, being across that will help you to communicate more effectively with your students in this case. So here are some development options. So to look closer at your strengths and areas for growth, there are a range of surveys available online. I mean, there's dozens of them. I've got one here that I'm going to recommend just as a starting point. As I said, there's so many choices, free choices online. There's also paid for choices too, if you so desire. But this one's from skillsyouneed.com, and they've got a couple of great sort of psychometric tests there, as well as communication skills tests. And you can go through these and get a bit of a profile on yourself. This is an example of one of the ones online. You go through a series of questions and they're kind of on a sliding scale here from agree to disagree type situation. And in the end, it builds a bit of a profile that it will email out to you down the track. So in summary, we've talked today about those 7 essential interpersonal skills for trainers. At the top of our list was communication skills, the lifeblood of any business. We talked about the importance of a positive attitude. The more we put in, the more we get out. Social awareness was next, understanding those norms, reading the room, checking what those expectations are and framing our message in a way that's going to be most acceptable. Using self-management, understanding how you react to things and checking your behavior. Is this going to be a productive outcome, or are you going to make matters worse? Looking at responsibility and accountability. Do you know what you're responsible for, and are you holding yourself in check? Are you holding yourself to be honest, if you like, or keeping yourself honest about following through on the things that you say that you'll do? Then we've got time management. I said before that this is probably the single greatest challenge that a trainer and assessor has. And we've got to learn, I guess, to be more productive with our time and do more with less, because the reality is there are just so many tasks that we have for us as a trainer and assessor, and this just gets more and more. So being more productive with our time, understanding what those priorities are going to be, are certainly part of the picture here. And the seventh one here, it was critical thinking and problem solving, getting your head across the multiple issues there are, and then looking for, again, multiple solutions to get the job done. Now I'm going to add a bonus eighth. We haven't talked about this one, but this, in fact, is one of my favorite ones. It's about being magnanimous. And what does this mean? Well, first of all, it means giving and forgiving. Now, this is something we can use in our own lives. We can only do what we can do. Rather than holding on to grudges and thinking in the process of revenge as a plate best served cold, you can waste a lot of time and your life in holding on to that negativity. So give what you can give, do your best job, but listen, don't hold on to those grudges. Keep things moving forward, and you try to find a common ground. Yet 9 times out of 10, if you can find that common ground or that middle ground, then life is going to be better. And the second part of being magnanimous is sharing the fame as well as sharing the blame. Now, there's a lot of people out there, when things are going fantastically, they want to take all the credit. It's all me. I've done this. I've motivated the team, or I've created these great student outcomes. And then when things aren't working, you're quick to point fingers at somebody else. Oh, it's not my fault. The resources weren't great. The students aren't capable. My manager doesn't give me enough time for planning, etc., etc. In this particular case, folks, it's about everybody benefiting and being part of the hero that can be training and assessment. So when things go well, we've done this, we've achieved this, the organization has achieved it, not necessarily me. And when things don't go so well, what can we learn from that? What can we all learn from that so that we can make it a better experience for our learners moving forward? So a quick poll, team: which interpersonal skill is most important to you? So choose one or more of the 8 that we see on the screen now. And certainly for those of you that are joining us not live, they're watching the video recording later, it's useful for you to get a sense for which of these is really your first cab off the rank when you leave this webinar today. So lots of responses coming in for communication skills, self-management, time management again, a few there for problem solving, social awareness. Good thinking there, folks. So really a cross-section of responses. So we're at the back end of our webinar, team. Here's your chance to ask if you have any final questions. Remembering you can always ask me a question later by emailing the details at the bottom of your screen. I will provide that a little bit later down the track. It was on the early screen, but again, you've got a chance to check that out. So the first question here, this one is from Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. And you're asking me which one is my favorite of those 8. Well, that's a great question. Thanks for putting me on the spot. Yeah, I've got to say a positive attitude makes a massive difference. I'll be putting that up there. And then time management. I can't say enough about that. That's the one, I've been doing this a long time, but that's the one that I still struggle with at certain times. So finding a structure, being disciplined about that, starting your week with a schedule. Looking at what those priorities are and making sure you've got a realistic way of allocating time to get that done. Interestingly, Jeff, I do a lot of travel. I travel overseas quite a bit, so I'm on long haul flights, and I'll look for projects to do on the plane. And if I'm at the back of the plane and I don't have a lot of space, those projects don't have to be on the computer. They might simply be thinking time. I need to think about a strategy or how to communicate to a team. Often what I'll be doing is I'm thinking about the next time I'm together with my team and how I can sort of motivate them or create a theme for the month or the year and so on and so forth. So again, we can use those moments of downtime more productively. Having said that, Jeff, sometimes that downtime can also add respite that recharges you for when you are back on focus. So again, making the best use of the time that you have. And the final one will be my bonus eighth, being magnanimous. And I did a video a few months ago where we talked about being that magnanimous BIG, and the BIG stands for three things. So it's about being bold, doing things that perhaps people don't expect, be inclusive, so getting as many different eyes and heads on the problem, and making sure that people feel like they're part of the process rather than that just happening to them, so that it's happening with them, not to them. And then be genuine, be your best self rather than trying to be someone that you're not. People will create better relationships when they feel like they're being authentic with you rather than you putting on a show. So some food for thought when it comes to that. It doesn't look like there's any other questions, folks, so we will move on. I'm going to invite you now to think about your action planning. So we've covered a lot of content today. What are your next steps? What things do you want to take action on as a result of our time together today? And whilst you're doing that, folks, there's all my details. So if you want to contact me after today, you can check it out on the email. You can check our website out, of course. And if it's 140 characters or less, feel free to tweet out your question and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So hopefully, folks, you've got some important actions next, some things that help you to make these interpersonal skills better. If you're in the role of trainers and assessors, how do we manage that classroom experience more? How do we communicate better? How do we frame those messages more effectively? How do we invest the time to make sure that we've got everything moving in that right direction and we've really considered the needs and expectations of our audiences? As always, folks, thanks for joining us and investing time in your own PD. We hope to see you on another Mr. Weird event sometime soon. Have a great day.